Hi everyone and welcome back to the Byolete podcast, the podcast where we discuss the science behind the brand. In this week's episode and the episodes that are going to follow on from this, we're going to be discussing in depth each individual biomarker that we at Byolete offer. So in this episode, we're going to be delving into HbA1c, a cardiometabolic marker that is an important one for you to test. Okay, so in the last episode, we told the listeners what panels that we would be offering under Byolete. And so the first two that we're rolling out was Prevent and Prevent Plus, and they were specifically targeted at determining cardiovascular disease risk. So in this episode, I wanted to delve deeper into one of the biomarkers that we're offering, which is HbA1c. So for those who don't know, do you want to explain what HbA1c is?
Throw me under the bus. HbA1c is normally used in diabetes to assess your blood sugar over normally 3 months, and it's the amount of hemoglobin within red blood cells that have attached to excess sugar within your circulatory system. So it's glycated hemoglobin A1c, isn't it?
Yeah. So in principle, the higher the number of this HbA1c, the sort of more glucose that you've got in your bloodstream, which is an indication of insulin resistance, and then which will eventually go on to potentially type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, so it's not a direct correlation with blood glucose, it's a good estimate.
Yeah.
So it's this idea, we know that blood cells have an average lifespan of 90 to 120 days. Yeah. There are things that can cause that to change, which would then affect the results of your HbA1c. But it's the best thing we've got without continuously measuring it, unless you are diabetic and you have, I don't know, Libra sensors, for example. Yeah. But in terms of results and ranges, so anything above 48, and the units that we're using is millimoles per mole. Yeah. In America, I believe they still use the percentages. Yes. So 48 millimoles per mole, I think, is 6.5%. We never used to trade or
I think
train with these.
I think before we did study, I think it was.
It was, and then it
changed when so I've never known it as the percentages.
But I think it's 6.5% is 48 millimoles per mole, which is classed as diabetic. So obviously anything above this could be type 1, type 2 diabetes. Then you've got 42 to 48 is the pre-diabetic range, which is where in reality we don't tend to do much in practice, but
no, unfortunately,
we should do more.
Yeah, unfortunately we don't. And I've had a couple of people come to me outside of work, just like asking for advice, like family and friends who have actually come and said, oh, I've got HbA1c of, around the 42 mark. And within the NHS, unfortunately, everyone's doing the best that they can, but we just don't have the capacity to really do what we should be doing for those patients, to be honest. And I wanted to point this out. If someone's getting a HbA1c at 42, especially if they're a younger patient, then there's 100% we need to be doing something, because we shouldn't be seeing patients young with a HbA of 42 unless they're known to have type 1 diabetes. It just shouldn't be happening. Even a HbA1c of late 30s, I probably would be thinking, okay, what's going on? We need to be checking a lot more. Again, that's one of the reasons why we set up Byolete, because we want to capture those people that unfortunately at the moment are not getting the support that they probably should because of a stretch system, basically.
Yeah. So less than 42 is classed as non-diabetic, but like you said, the lower the better, up until a point, because we do need glucose within the system as an energy source, mainly for the brain. Yeah. But it normally goes down to about 20. So 20 to 42. Well, 41.999 is non-diabetic. Ideally, get it as low as you can within that range, because then it reduces the chance of insulin resistance, which we all know. Well, actually, we've looked into in a lot more detail recently. Yeah, we will go into in later podcasts, but the risk with cardiovascular disease with insulin resistance is really high, and that's one reason why we've included it within this panel.
I was going to say, a lot of people might be thinking, what's diabetes got to do with cardiovascular risk? But we know that diabetes is there is a direct correlation between diabetes and the risk of cardiovascular disease, such as heart attacks, strokes, peripheral vascular disease. So it is an important biomarker to check for cardiovascular risk.
Yeah, so they estimate that by the time a diabetic patient has seen a GP or healthcare professional, 10 to 15% of this cohort already have significant cardiovascular disease. And then I think it goes on to 80% will eventually develop it. So it's highly correlated with it. And that's why we aim with treatment of diabetic patients to try and mitigate this risk. In terms of my results, I thought I'd share them. So when I was discharged from national screening back in 2017, my HbA1c got to 51. Yeah, so my rare form of diabetes is a bit funny because it actually can range from 40 to 60, which is non-diabetic to quite established diabetes. But mine was 51, ironically, when I was having the healthiest diet I've ever had with protein shakes. And then recently we've got it down to 46. I think that's probably going to be my lower limit, but we're going to see eventually when we get retested.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's very important that you see what's happening. And like I said, there are some times when your results might not be accurate. So because it's based on your blood cell production, so if you've got anything that's increasing the rate of removal of blood cells, so for example, if you're bleeding a lot, heavy menstrual bleeding, for example, your HbA1c could be falsely low. And then there's other conditions which are few and far between where your HbA1c is falsely high, and that's if you've got a reduced clearance. I was going to say the genetic form, but it's like beta thalassemia, and I'm not going to say it because I'm going to mess it up. But there are times when your blood cells aren't cleared from the body at the same rate, so then they're staying around for longer. Your HbA1c is again falsely high. So what happens when you get these results back? We're going to give you the information based on the guidance. If you are within a certain range above 42, we would be then seeking referral to the NHS, get you on that pathway, get a venous blood supply or blood test, and then see where you're at. And then it would be a case of, if you do have the funds, go and get a continuous blood glucose monitor, because that is the only way. I know companies like Zoe are doing it at the moment with seeing how your body reacts, but that is the way forward with this.
Yeah, that was like obviously really comprehensive of what you've just explained. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else that we needed to point out with regards to HbA1c?
In terms of frequency of how you should get tested, same with anything on the panel that we're offering is, one test a year is obviously better than not getting tested at all.
Unless, I was going to say, unless obviously you've got an abnormal result, in which case then we would recommend potentially maybe increasing that frequency.
Yeah, or if you want to see if any changes that you've implemented are having an effect, then it's a minimum of 3 months that I would say.
Yeah, 3 to 6 months is probably the minimum, isn't it?
Yeah, but HbA1c I think is underappreciated. I think people disregard it as a number, but it is telling you a lot within the body. And blood glucose, homeostasis, metabolism with insulin, in my opinion, is like the central component 100%. To a lot of longevity. 100%. And if you can unlock this feature, then I think it's a big thing sorted.
Because I just wanted to say as well, where if we take a patient who's presented with a HbA1c of 48, so they're just in the diabetic range, we know that actually they're probably been insulin resistant for at least a decade before, which means that they've been in between 42 to 48. And like we said again in the previous podcast, a lot of the time we won't see them patients, and so we'll see them patients at 50 present to us, and they've got a HbA1c of 48, and actually they've got all of this pathology going on underneath, which has been going on for 10 years, damaging the blood vessels, and like just basically affecting every system within the body. If they tested the 10 years before, they could have saw that and then potentially done something about it. And so HbA1c is such an important one to test.
It is. And one thing we want to point out is, yes, we are going to be advocating lifestyle first because that's what we believe in. But also we have trained in medicine for the best part of 15 years between us. And we aren't naive in the sense that you may need pharmacotherapy. There are things that I'll need it for in the future, undoubtedly, where you can't fix it through lifestyle. There's no diet that I know of that has reversed type 1 diabetes at the moment. So that's the thing. Use lifestyle first, but actually implement it. We always say, eat a better diet and do these things, but actually implement it, and it has a better effect than what you give it credit for.
I love that, because I think we're sort of entering an era now with on social media where people are sort of they're going against big pharma and pharmaceutical companies and pharmaceutical products, thinking that like you say, the diet's going to be able to reverse everything, and like you say, it doesn't. Obviously, if you utilize it alongside pharmacotherapy, that's the best, you know, and even preventing it in the first place would be the ideal thing. However, some things are just inevitable, and no matter how hard you try, you know, genetics play a part, or, you know, whatever. But yeah, 100%, you know, diet first, but also if you need pharmacotherapy, you need pharmacotherapy. And in the case of type 2 diabetes, there's some pretty unbelievable drugs out there at the moment, like we will go into in later podcasts, that they're not going to be able to do what your diet can do. The same with cholesterol, you know, and so yeah, it's important that we do just point that out.
It's very good. I'll let you close it.
Yeah, so I think hopefully that's given you a bit more of an understanding of HbA1c and why you should test it, and how often you potentially should test it, and why it relates to the cardiovascular disease. Like I say, we will be delving deeper into individual topics, so stay tuned and like follow the podcast to hear more from us. But yeah, anyway, thanks for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the episode. If you haven't already, then please like and subscribe to the channel, and then also we'll leave the links to our own Instagrams down below if you want to follow us on those. But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you at the next one.